Hey, I want to welcome you to the Disciple Making Church podcast, and we are so excited that you're joining us again this month. And if you're new to our podcast, man, we welcome you. We're glad that you have come along as well. This is really kind of a place where you can find out all things about disciple making in a local church. And so today I'm hosting. My name's Ken Adams, and I'm the founder and director of Impact Ministries, and also the lead pastor at Crossroads Church in Noonan, Georgia. And joining me today is Lance Sumner. And Lance is a part of our small group leadership team, but also is part of our Impact consultant team. And so, Lance, good to have you, man.
Yes, sir.
Things going good for you?
Outstanding.
Fantastic, man. Well, that's good. You ready to talk all things small groups?
Yes, sir.
Good. So here at Crossroads Church, small groups are a big deal, right?
Very much so.
And in fact, I have really been sort of a passionate about seeing our church be a church that has not just a church with small groups, but a small group church.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been at that now for going on 34 years. And around here, there's a statement that people have heard quite a bit. Do you know what that statement is?
Everybody needs to be in a small group.
Everybody needs to be in a small group, man. And so in fact, the truth is, Lance, people are kind of tired of hearing it because we talk about it so much. But it's really, really true. And so today we're going to really just sort of unpack the reasons why people need to be in a small group.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll lay that out. We'll talk about really not all the reasons. We'll talk about some of those key reasons. And then we'll turn the corner a little bit and we'll talk about what does small group ministry look like here in our church, because it can look a little bit differently in different places. Mm-hmm. And then we'll wrap that up by sharing with all the people who are watching today and maybe even later some upcoming opportunities that we have through Impact Ministry. So,
yes, sir.
So let's start with this first idea that we do believe that everybody needs to be in a small group because, first and foremost, because Jesus had a small group.
Yeah.
And he is our model. But one of the reasons that we like to say that everybody needs to be in a small group is because a small group is the ideal place for care.
It is.
Tell us about why that is true in your opinion.
Well, I mean, if you're not in a small group, you can get lost in the numbers of the church to a certain extent. Small groups are typically, especially our impact groups, are 6 to 12. I mean, with that smaller number, it's a more intimate relationship. You know more about each other. You're doing life together. And in a big crowd, it's sometimes difficult to share your struggles, share your needs, and it's easy for especially people that may be introverted,
right,
to just pull back and be in the shadows,
right,
rather than actually doing life on life together.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, it's really an ideal place for care, because you're actually doing life together, having relationships with people in the church. It's really the place that you get connected.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, it's really the ideal place for care to happen.
Yeah. You know, Lance, I think about the passage in Acts chapter 2 where it talks about the early church in Jerusalem,
Mm-hmm.
and it says that they were meeting together in houses,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that it says is that they shared with each other, took care of each other's needs, and the problem with a large group is that in a large group, it's hard to know what other people's needs are.
Mm-hmm.
But in a small group, the size of the crowd makes it totally possible
Mm-hmm.
for you to know what other people are struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
what they're going through, but also what good things are happening in a person's life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, even in let's put it this way, regardless of the size of the church,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a church of 75 people or a church of 7,000
Mm-hmm.
people, once you get to a certain size,
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible to be able to hear from everybody, and it's impossible to be able to know everybody's needs. And in fact, in a large group, you kind of can lose track who's there from week to week.
Yes.
But it never happens in a small group.
It doesn't, and if there's an empty chair in a small group, everybody knows there's an empty chair.
Absolutely.
The other thing too, I was listening to one podcast this week from Focus on the Family. It's talking about how people that just come to church, the church is supposed to be there for each other, to build each other up, and it's amazing to him how many people, all of a sudden he's like they're getting a divorce, and he's like, why didn't we know this? Well, they're not in a small group. Yeah. And we could have helped them. We could have been there for them. Yeah. In a small group setting, they're more likely to open up about stuff.
Yeah.
That may not be seen in a bigger crowd too, and be needing help and be available for help.
Yeah. Perfect example. It's funny. I was in a small group earlier this morning. You were too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a small group with a group of men. And what's interesting is as soon as the group started, the conversation led to where are the 2 or 3 guys that we're missing today?
Mm.
And that would never happen on a weekend.
Mm-mm.
They would never say, we're so-and-so and so-and-so. But the very first thing we said was, we're so-and-so and we're so-and-so. And that's because we care,
mm-hmm.
and they care. So, you got small kids, right? You got a son that's how old?
10.
He's 10. So do you want do you want your son to be in a classroom with a smaller teacher pupil student ratio or a larger one?
You want them to be in a smaller because they're going to get more individual attention.
That's exactly
and
right.
Just a shout out to one of our teachers here at TC. We happened to miss this past Sunday, and Miss Kendra sent a note to my son and said, your smile and your leadership was missed. Wow. I know it's one Sunday, but you were missed this week.
Wow.
It was noticed, and that made him feel extra special at home too.
And I'm so glad you said that because, sometimes we think about our small group ministry in terms of the adult side. But
mm-hmm.
you know what, man? There is when you have a small children's group with a very, faithful, reliable, dependable person teaching or
mm-hmm.
leading that group, the impact that person makes on a child's life is incredible.
It is.
It's incredible. So good shout out there. So the second thing we say, Lance, is that we say that that a small group is the ideal place for care, but we also say that the small group is the ideal place for growth.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thought on that?
Well, it goes back to what you just said about the children's ministry. It's the ratio of even I like to call small group leaders as really facilitators of conversation more so than teaching. The Sunday school model I grew up with is one person does the lesson and it turns into another preaching. In small groups, the way we try to lead it is everybody's participating in conversation and opening up. So they're really facilitating conversation. And so it's a good place for growth because the leader to student ratio is more intimate. And more people open up and start talking as trust is built, because it's a whole lot easier to build trust with a group with a small number rather than being in a big crowd and feel like you might be judged or something. After the weeks of building trust and building relationship, somebody's more inclined to open up with what they're dealing with, and having the group or the group leader address it in a small group setting rather than a big group setting.
Yeah, that's really good. There's a reason why in just about every venue you can think about, from athletics to the military to is that they always train in small groups, and that's because the accountability, the encouragement, the ability to process and think through new information and content and all that, it's so much more effective and so much more efficient when you're doing it in a smaller context of anywhere from 6 to 12 people. You just learn so much better in a small group than you do in a large group. It's because you take it to another level. In that large group, it's pretty much just you're hearing and that's all. But when you're in that smaller group, you're not only hearing, but you're beginning to apply it because you're able to discuss it.
It's funny that you mentioned about the military, me being former military, and it's, we'll have battalions, then we'll have units, but then the units have squads. Mm. And so you can almost take that to the mindset of the church. We have big church, and then we have smaller, divided into different ministries, and then we have small groups within those ministries of one-on-one. And even coaching baseball here at Crossroads, I have 13 kids. But when we do our training, we split up in groups of 4, and that really is a small group with the teacher as and they get it more. Yeah. You can teach more to an individual person, unless if you had all 13 at one time, you can't do the individual training.
Right. And, which goes back and is a great reminder that when you think about the fact that, Jesus the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is teaching a large crowd of people. And at times he'd have as many as 4,000 or 5,000 people in a crowd. And Jesus was clearly teaching there. It was a transferring of information. But it's interesting that when he would pull away with his small group, they would oftentimes debrief what he had talked about in the large group. He would teach in parables, and then he'd get along with his disciples and they'd say, tell us what that meant. Or he would say, let me explain to you what that parable meant. So the best example that we have is the fact that Jesus was trying to help a group of guys go from what we would call untrained seekers to fully trained disciples. And if Jesus himself knew the best way for people to grow spiritually was in a context of a small group, then how can we not have small groups as a part of the disciple-making process and the spiritual growth process? And yet, what's amazing, Lance, is that there are actually some churches that have little to no small group environments at all. So what do you think the problem is there, man?
Different. The biggest thing that I see, one of the statements that I often see is a lot of pastors have been discipled how to do church, not make disciples. And that's part of the problem, and that's part of this transition process in the mentality. I was one. That's why I can say it. But I think that's part of the problem, and people are, I think it's a pride thing too, an ego thing too, that it may be on the pastor not enabling somebody and trusting them and releasing them because they haven't equipped them to release them. But it's also from the standpoint of some people might not want to be a part of a small group because they know. Yeah. They know transformation and growth is going to happen, and I'm going to have to be real. Yeah. And my sin will be exposed. Yeah. In the process.
That's good. I think those are all really good examples of why some churches just are resistant, and some churches are very pulpit centric. Where it's all revolves around a personality rather than on equipping saints to do the work of ministry. So that brings us to a third part of this answer, or this question: why does everybody need to be in a small group? It's the best ideal place for care. It is really the ideal place for growth, but it is also the ideal place for character transformation, right? And so, why would we say that character is developed better in a small group than in a large group? Why would we say that?
Well, it's easier to get in a large group setting. It's easier to get lost in the crowd. When you're one-on-one and doing the character, the part of character transformation occurs because people get to see, in a sense, sooner or later, if you're meeting for a bunch of weeks, sooner or later, the real you is going to show up in a conversation, or your character is going to be exposed, maybe how you handle the situation. So that's one thing we say. One of the 4 C's to small groups is correction. For transformation to occur, we have to be corrected, and I'm going to be more receptive to being corrected with somebody I have built up a relationship with. In a large group setting, if somebody sees me respond to somebody and they have no relationship with me, and they just come up, "Hey, Lance, why'd you say it like that?" Yeah, that's going to be I'm not going to receive it as much as I would if me and you in a small group had been building relationship together and had fellowship together, and you're speaking truth because you've built up equity in my life.
That's right.
To actually speak that truth in love.
You got a little relational change in your pocket.
Yes.
And I think also too, it's important to know that it is in the context of that small group where personalities come out, and that's where the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, have to be on display.
Yes.
Or you'll drive each other crazy, right? And so we joke about this sometimes, that when you travel with somebody, you do one or two things. You either work through your differences or you kill each other, right? And so when you are closer to somebody in proximity, and you spend a regular amount of time together, but also you're close enough to each other, that's where the good and the bad come out. And so if you think about it, all of the fruit of the Spirit are best developed in the context of personalities.
Well, and I love the quote that we share with Disciple Making Church from Billy Graham. How yes, Jesus had big crowds, but the greatest impact that he had was in small groups.
Right.
And even he said there's not too many churches actually doing this.
Right.
And this is coming from a guy that was all about big groups.
In small groups.
But the greatest impact, he says, is with 10 to 12.
Absolutely. So the last thing that we want to look at is the fact that small groups are also really the ideal way to make disciples in the context of a local church, to be a disciple-making church. And so we say that because if you're truly wanting to be a disciple-making church, then small groups are a part of an overall process to get people to go from untrained to fully trained. And so that small group environment becomes an integral part of that whole disciple-making process, which brings us to another part I want to talk about, and that is, what does it look like in our church? Because one of the reasons for this podcast is that we're trying to give people some very practical, hands-on, this is what it looks like. And so here in our church, we have a lot of people have only been a part of a few of them, but we really actually have 4 different types of small groups. So talk us through some of those, and then I'll...
Well, one of them is our discovery groups.
Okay.
Discovery groups are actually to in a sense, are an outreach group.
That's right.
Now one of our church members opens up their home, and maybe one of us as pastors may come and help lead that to reach their neighborhood, and they may would come to their home but not come to our church.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. The other one would have been one of the support groups.
Yeah. Recovery
groups that we have on Tuesday nights, and some people, before they're ready to jump in a small group or intentional discipling group, they just got some stuff they need to work out.
Right.
And so that's what our support and recovery groups are for. Then we have community groups. Community groups are really, we call them our easy onboarding areas. When somebody's new to the church, they're easy on-ramps to get them connected, to get them feeling part of the church, to get them connected to people. Because, people are going to come because of personal invite. They're going to stay because they get connected. And so that's what and then we have our impact groups. And that's really where the intentional discipling comes from. One thing that I say when I'm sharing with them is now all the impact groups are open. I mean, all groups are open. Impact groups are only open for like the first section, and then we want to become closed so we can actually build that relationship and build that trust to speak and gain equity to speak in truth in somebody's life.
Right.
So, but the other ones are always open.
Right.
For easy on-ramps to get people involved. And that's really what small groups really become the ideal section. They're not they're never the end goal to have a small group. They're the means to the end. Right. They really drive the mission.
That's right.
Of help. We want to help people have all their spiritual needs met. And the one way to do that and disciple them, what it means to look like, and have the character and conduct of Christ, be and build, and really it's continually helping move people to
Right.
grow in Christ.
Yeah, it does drive the mission of the church. And since we walked through that real fast, let me
sorry.
fill it. No, that's good. You did exactly what we wanted. But when we do that discovery group that we use as an outreach, those are usually 4, 5, 6 weeks in length. They're not ongoing groups, although people get connected from those groups. They come to our church, usually our weekend service as a result of that. We do usually something like a marriage type group, or parenting, or finance, or body, physical management, that kind of thing, health kind of thing. That's what I'm trying to say. And so then the recovery groups are for really specific needs that people have, either divorce recovery, or an addiction support group, or survivors of suicide, things that are very specific needs. Those we want people to graduate from. We don't want people to stay in there forever. We want people to get healed and then move on. And then our community groups are really places for growth and care. They're more general. They tend to be couples, but we also have men's and women's groups. And sometimes they study the sermon from the weekend. Sometimes they might study an approved curriculum that we have here. But then when we get people to the impact group, so the impact group is really a set curriculum that drives the mission of our church. And we would say it really is ministry training. So it's not just deeper life. It's not just mastering spiritual disciplines. It's really the equipping track that helps people to learn what it means to live like Jesus and to lead like Jesus. And that is actually out of that impact curriculum. That's where we develop our future leaders. And that's why we say that it is a part of the overall mission of the church. So that really is why everybody needs to be in a small group. That's right. So from hopefully people will be able to benefit from that. And then we actually have a blog coming out this next week on everything we just talked about. If you want to follow through with that, hear a little bit more in that, obviously you can contact us at impactdisciples.com. You can share this with some other people that you know in your church, or maybe that are involved in ministry where you're at. And we are more than happy to come alongside churches and help them figure out a little bit more about how small groups become an integral part of a disciple-making church.
Yes, sir.
So a couple of things that we have coming up in the next few months. First of all, we have a brand new resource that we've just are releasing and just now introducing. It's another 30 days book. We have a series of books that are called 30 Days, and they are great for a staff and for a leadership team to go through. Our newest resource is called The First 30 Days to Becoming a Disciple-Making Pastor. And so it is just a simple, easy to read, easy to use, day by day, really a great study and encouragement for a potential pastor, but also for an existing pastor who's saying, what does it look like for me to lead my church to becoming a disciple-making church? And then you want to mention something about this?
This is a good one for those that are new to the idea of small groups, or pastors or churches that may be confused how to implement small groups. We have this tool called Small Group Essentials. It's a 4-week study of just how to do small groups and how they impact the church, and what small groups look like, and how small groups help make disciples. So that's a great tool, and we actually use it here with our small group leaders too, just to show them too how to do small groups and the impact that it would have.
So we got some curriculum and some resources. We also have some training coming up.
Yes.
And so you're about to start a disciple-making pastors online equipping group, right?
Yeah, May 10th.
May 10th?
May 10th is that going to start? May to the end of June.
And so give them a little idea of what that looks like. How does that work? And how can they sign up?
They can go to impactdisciples.com. It's 7 weeks. 7 weeks on Zoom. You don't have to travel to us. We get to meet all on Zoom, and we go over the 6 priorities of what it means to be a disciple-making pastor. So we really cover the 30 days, but it's really an intimate setting of us building upon each other, how it applies to the context of our ministry. And had one yesterday, and it was a great conversation. The conviction and also growth. Some of the stuff may be stuff people already know, but we need to be reminded to implement it in our lives.
Yeah, and there is a suggested donation for that to help out with the cost, but cost will never get in the way of somebody joining and being a part of that. And so you can go find out more about that on impactdisciples.com as well. And then finally, is we've got some disciple-making church seminars coming up. I'll be doing one in Conyers, which is in the Atlanta area, on April the 29th. And so you can, again, go to our website to sign up, register for that. Bring a group of people with you if you want to. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to come and learn more about how did Jesus literally start a movement that will become the church that is a disciple-making movement. And you'll be doing one in Alabama. Where are you going to be?
Same day.
Same day.
We're going to be doing disciple-making church as well. They can sign up on impactdisciples.com. We're going to be at Greenbrier Baptist Church in Anniston, Alabama. So they can sign up the same way. We're going to go over defining the target, going over the strategy that Jesus used, and just how to have the right disciple-making groups and the important leadership strategy.
Yeah, it's good.
I wish I had learned it, honestly, in seminary. But I'm so thankful that to have been discipled and been taught this. I think it can have a great impact on a lot of churches.
Absolutely. I believe that too. Well, thanks for joining me, man.
Yes, sir.
Talking about small groups. And thank you for joining us again this month as we just continue to sort of dive into what does it look like to not just be a church with discipleship, but to truly be a disciple-making church.
Amen.
So share this with as many people as you can, and we will see you again next month.